impact, because it's this concentrated moment in time we tend to focus on. And I think one of the things that we'll talk about is how the new rules of PR can actually extend your product launch window. So not only is it a great moment, it's a moment that we can actually extend the pre-launch phase and the post-launch phase, and we can do it to great effect.
Amazing. Well, Ben, we're looking forward to diving in deep on this topic together. I will say we are now streaming across all of our network of platforms. And I'll remind the audience who is with us on Zoom, if you have any questions or if you have any insights, thoughts, comments, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll periodically pause to give those questions and comments to Ben.
Sounds great. And Jackson, you should be seeing my screen right now. So hopefully that is working as well. Yep. And let's jump into the new rules of PR for product launches. If you're just joining us now, I'm Ben Kaplan, the CEO of Top Worldwide. Thanks to Jackson Carpenter for hosting. And we're going to go through and talk about kind of 7 key principles of PR applied to product launches that I think are really important. And I think there are new types of rules that really no one used 5 years ago. And now it's driving a lot of the ROI we see from product launches. We're going to talk about that today. First, one of the things I always like to say is, be careful of who you take advice from, but be very patient with those who give it. And so let me just show you maybe 45 seconds on how we think about the world and how that influences our view of how PR is really most effective, particularly on a product launch, and then we'll start applying all this to all of you. So just a few things about us. Top. We're a global marketing agency with data-driven thinking in our DNA. So you're going to see a lot of use of data to make PR for product launches more efficient, more effective, more scalable. TOP is actually an acronym. So it stands for Test, Optimize, and Perform. That's our 3-step process. So even in a product launch, we're often testing things, even as we're launching things, or we're testing things for the next product launch in advance. We're optimizing our message. We'll talk about the use of A/B testing of different messages for a product launch and how you can use that to sort of adjust and optimize and pivot a little bit faster than other people. And then we'll talk about, and then finally, perform is part of TOP, and we'll talk about how you scale performance. We're working on product launches now, like 20 countries simultaneously, and what are some of the challenges of scaling that performance. So we'll talk about that. These are the things we do. So we're going to focus on PR for product launches today, but we work in 48 different marketing disciplines. They're organized into 6 groups. So in our agency, we have the communications group, the creative group, the digital group, the advertising group, the insights group, and the growth group. We're going to talk, especially on product launches, from the perspective of how PR is the glue that can actually integrate multiple disciplines. And I think a more modern view of PR is that PR doesn't just mean like press release, or PR doesn't just mean, classic media relations. So we'll talk about how it can be the glue that sort of integrates all of that. And then in terms of our agency, we have 12 different agencies as part of the Top Agency Network. We're famous for an agency called PR Hacker, which is a viral data-driven PR agency, but we have many other agencies, whether it's Top Digital that works on scaling, digital marketing, to industry-specific ones like Top Finance or Top Health or Top Tech. So that's kind of the perspective, and I'm going to give you examples from all of these 12 agencies on how we sort of conduct product launches. And then final thing I say is we're currently working in 20 countries around the globe. We have boots on the ground in more than 20 countries, actually. And so I'm going to talk about this from a global perspective. Certainly we'll do a lot for North America and if there's a US audience here, which we often have, but we also have a global audience, and we'll talk about coordination across the globe. And especially right now, we're doing a lot of emphasis on both EMEA, Latin America, a bit of APAC as well. So we'll talk about how that's different, how that can be coordinated to great effect. So, and we'll talk about the startup side. That's part of our clients. I'll give you some examples, and the big brand side. We do both of those as well. So let's start out with asking and answering this question, which is, what PR questions are we asking now that we didn't ask before? And specifically, what are these questions and how do they apply to product launches in this new kind of modern conception? So one of the first questions we used to ask, and of course, this is the ultimate product launch question, right? Which is what upcoming company news do we have to announce, right? Like, what's coming for the product launch? What's the nature of that launch? We've got to announce it. So obviously there's still an element of that, but I think where we're doing increasingly more of tying that product launch to this question, which is, what recent data can we utilize to create a newsworthy trend? So we're using data more to contextualize the product launch, to offer thought leadership, to like create a moment where we can get people's attention by having some valuable data that no one else has and connecting that to our product. So one of the interesting applications of this is, I think with product launches, we have a certain amount of our PR efforts like very focused on the product itself, but it might be like industry specific, or it might be like different audiences or persona based. But then we're using maybe a data study. We're using the newsjacking of a trend. We're using other elements to pull people into that product launch. So I think the sort of like one-dimensional view of a product launch, which is just like, here's the new product, that's it, ta-da, there it is for you, I think is a little bit more multidimensional now, where there's elements of that, although we even dimensionalize the audiences for that, but also how do we add context, strategic context around that new product launch or around that new feature that allows it to be more interesting to people that might not be interested just on the fact that there's a new product, but they might be interested in all of the thought leadership elements that go around that. You can pull people in and then connect that to your product. So the new rule is develop data programs to accelerate thought leadership, even while you're doing product launches too. So we often have a thought leadership element, a data program on top of that, and that's synced to this cadence of what we call booms, sparks, and beats. So booms are like the big launches, sparks are the mid-sized ones, and beats are like kind of like the little things that happen all the time. So can we get this boom product launch laddered with and connected to a data program, thought leadership, all sort of convalescing at the same time? Jackson, you work on a ton of these. I don't have any thoughts on sort of this greater context for product launches that allows us to get a bigger audience and think about it a little bit broader than just like, you know, the kind of the old traditional, like, we have a new product, here's a press release, here's the product, go to the trade shows, make sure everyone's doing reviews, call it a day, move on.
Yeah, I think the boom, sparks, and beats kind of framework is a really useful one, Ben. I think that it's very easy, in particular, if you're in a company that doesn't do frequent product launches, to kind of lose sight of the fact that there's a lot you can be doing to extend the lifeline of that news and make it relevant over a longer time period. Data is huge for that, right? We say that if you just have kind of company news, a product launch, or similar, the shelf life of that by itself is pretty short. But if you can figure out how to tie that into other events or trends or industry news, you can prolong the life of that news a lot longer, right? And you can create the sense that your organization is actually tied into an ascendant trend, which is very important as you sort of consider.
Well, and the way I think of it to make sure it ladders back is this, which is, you know, if you have a product launch, as part of that product, it has certain, you know, features, right? It has certain benefits. So you can launch those things. But now if you can, for that data context, if you can connect each of those features or benefits to a data point that ladders directly back. So I don't mean just like data generally, like, oh yeah, here's some data, it's generally on the topic. But no, it's like, this is product benefit number one. Here is data point number one that directly relates to product benefit number one. And here's product benefit number two, right? And here's like data point number two that directly relates to that. Or here's product benefit number three, and here's data point number three. So like, we're connecting all these together. The interesting thing is, one, it contextualizes it to make it more interesting for the launch. But then that data, after the product launch has sort of happened, news is released, it's out there, those data points can still be applied to other things, right? So something happens in the news. We do a lot of cybersecurity work, for instance, right? And there's a new cybersecurity breach in the news. And our data that is connected to our product launch is really relevant. So we might, you know, Jackson, we might just say, okay, let's start pitching that data to respond because it's insightful for that breach that was in the news. And that actually ladders back, sort of like the breach in the news ladders back to our data point, ladders back to our product. So ultimately, we can do rapid response and what's happening in the news, and yet we're still promoting our product if we kind of set out this strategic map accordingly. So I think that's really, really, really powerful. Brings us to this kind of summary, which is great data tells a story that is valuable to others, yet can still ladder back to our brand's core value, our positioning, and ultimately the product that we're launching, right? So how do we connect the features, the benefits of that product to data points? how do we connect those data points to what's breaking in the news? And that gives us the freedom to say our product launch is going to newsjack, it's going to piggyback, it's going to leverage on all of these other stories. And that's going to make our product much more relevant to what's going on. We're going to have a bigger audience. We're going to have a longer shelf life. All of those are the benefits. Okay. So the old way. So the old way for PR would be say like, hey, we're doing a product launch, and as part of this launch, like, there's stories being written and like there's roundups being written or listicles being done. And like, why were some of our competitors' features and we weren't? We'd be worried about that. I think the new way is much more of how can we use our competitors' coverage to increase our mind share for the product launch. So if a competitor is being covered and they've sort of made inroads with a certain journalist, how do we leverage that for our launch as well? So one of the things we're doing a lot more of is saying, okay, anything that was like a competitor product, anything that's a related product, anything that's like a tangential product, who covered it, right? Which publications, which journalists, which influencers talked about it? That's a roadmap for us. And so at minimum, our table stakes is we want to be everywhere everyone else was. And by the way, they made it easier for us because they showed us who will publish stories on this. So we're doing much more of and we have some tools at top and PR Hacker that does this, that we built to do this. Like, let's look at these 112 stories that featured our competitors, that showed the places that will cover this. And let's make sure we have a strategic plan to be in all of those places in a way that communicates our message. And that's just the starting point. We want to go beyond that list, but that's a great way to start. So we call this the slingshot. And the idea is whether it's competitors, either direct or indirect, or partners, or related companies, like really big Goliath companies, like maybe you're not competing with Apple or Google, but they play in your space. So whoever those are, it's number one there. We'll do before a product launch, we'll do a search of all competitor media coverage in the past 12 months. We'll map that to a list of media contacts, and we'll make sure that our product launch is there for their consideration. We'll get a lot of stories to run, but also what we want to make those media gatekeepers aware that there's a new product out there, that it's innovative in this way, that it's important for understanding the industry, that they understand this innovation. So all of those things are even beyond the media placement. We want media mind share. We want, and that's a great way to do that. And then part two on this slide is we'll set up in real time ongoing competitor mentions or partner mentions so that we can continue to insert that product with anyone who's covering anything potentially related to us. So new rule number 2 is create a rapid response system to react in real time for product launches. Map out the coverage that happened before you so you can piggyback on it, but then react in real time to everything that's breaking. And during that launch window, we're still doing rapid response. That's a little bit different than traditional. You'd say like, okay, you plan the product launch, this is your messaging, you release it. You're focused on what you do. You're not focused on responding quickly. I think much more now you can, and it can play great dividends. So here's an example in action. I just want to kind of show you how we do this specifically. Like from step 1, we identify a news opportunity, something we're tracking, let's say in a competitor. 2, we immediately pitch the reporter of that, our product launch angle, our data angle. That's a step 2. And step 3, we basically will take the story, remove the competitor from the story, insert ourselves in it, and pitch 20 lookalike journalists. So practically speaking, on our top team, this is 3 different people. One person's like identifying and curating. Second person's pitching the journalist who matches, who wrote the story. Third person's taking the story, removing the competitor, and pitching other related journalists, right? And that's how we get a headline like this, which coincided with a product launch for one of our cybersecurity clients, where this headline, cyber attacks are an immediate challenge for businesses following Iran strike. It actually came from, we pitched Contessa Brewer at CNBC because we saw her cover cyber attacks on governments related to Iran, but not corporations. Our product launch was related to cyber attack protection for corporations. So we said, hey, you know what? Iran, they attacked JP Morgan Chase in the 1980s. Businesses could be at risk too. Might you cover this? So we were able to piggyback on breaking news and then leverage it back to a product launch in this case. And then On this next slide, we took that CNBC story, repackaged it, pitched it to more journalists. NPR, this Morning Edition, was interested, and they ran this headline, which is that Iran conflict could ship to cyberspace, experts warn. That also connected back to our product launch as well. So now we're using the news by being smart, by creating these slingshots to promote our product launch, even if it's on a topic totally unrelated like Iran. Suddenly we're leveraging it during that launch window, if that makes sense. And Jackson, any thoughts you want to add on this? Because I know we often talk about, the offense and defense of product launches or PR for product launches, right? Like offense is like your message, creating stories, creating data, going out there. This is like the defense. This is like reacting in real time, but using everything that's going on in the media, everything that's going on with competitors to insert our product in the story.
Yeah, I think this is super key, Ben. I think if we look at kind of a common misconception in the world of kind of earned media and public relations, a common misconception is this kind of like field of dreams syndrome, where it's like, if we build it,
if you build it, they will come. Okay, yes.
We made a great product, and so people are going to want to talk about it. But the truth is, there are tons of product launches happening every single day. And in the vast majority of cases, you have to fight for relevance. And one of the ways you can do that is by actually having a great understanding of what stories are ascendant right now, and then looking for creative ways to tie your product launch back to ascendant trends, right? And I think that's just super essential, because if you're not doing that, the sphere of journalists who are going to care about what you're doing gets a lot smaller, and their attention span gets a lot shorter.
And the trick, Jackson, is that I think, and we've talked about this before, and kind of the booms, sparks, and beats framework, is that usually it's a big product launch, it's a boom. You've got to plan it in advance. You're not, it's not just PR factors that are determining when you're launching, right? There's company-wide factors that are determining this date. So you can't just be like, I'm going to wait around and launch the product right when, this big like news blip hits that I can leverage. So you probably can't do that. Maybe you can do that with other types of news, but not product launches. It's too set. Sure. However, when it is set, there might be strategic business reasons to be in Q3 window launch. You can then, within that context, look at all the other trends and news and everything go around. So I think sometimes people are like, oh, I love being responsive, but product launches I can't be, because I've got to plan this like a year in advance. And so we're not going to be able to like tweak our date. But I even love this, because I'd say half the times in the companies we deal with, they have a plan for a product launch. It's planned long in advance, and it inevitably, somehow it slips. It's like, it was going to be June. It's now July. It's just the way it is. So I think this nimbleness also allows you to just like jump on it, embrace it, and still be nimble, even as you're being very well planned in advance.
Yeah, I think it requires a certain degree of creativity and comfort with some improvisation. But the results are they speak for themselves. We look at, many of the clients who we do rapid response for would not normally be garnering the interest, for example, of an NPR or a CNBC for a given launch, but by being sort of very fast and prepared to, speak to what makes them relevant, they're able to garner a tremendous amount of attention, because they're the first ones in when the journalist is looking for a source.
And actually, that's true. I mean, here's another example that I'm just hearing you say that I'm recollecting, relating to using Apple beat reporters. So we have a client, it's a marketplace of used gadgets. They were having a product launch for the new feature in their marketplace. And so a certain number of people are going to cover, them, or might be interested in them. But like the journalist for the New York Times who covers Apple generally wouldn't be interested. The difference is, actually what we did was, we had, as part of our launch window, Apple had a launch window of the new iPhone. So we were actually pitching beat reporters about, basically some data saying like, hey, we have the only data in town on what people really want in the new iPhone. That was related to our product launch, which was for a new product where you could sell your own old iPhone for more money. And so suddenly, beat reporters for Apple, for the New York Times and Wall Street Journal and USA Today are featuring a company they'd never cover, but because we're relating it to Apple, suddenly they're happy to talk about our product launch. So that's like the power of using this, is that it's also just the law of numbers. You want to be in the New York Times, if you can contextualize this, suddenly you pitch 40 reporters and editors instead of 5, because you're making it more relevant. Old way. The old way, we'd say, well, like, why aren't, journalists more interested in this story? We'd say like, hey, we think this product launch is great. This is innovative. This is the world's first. No one's quite done it in this way, but we're not getting the results we want. Why aren't journalists interested? Now, much more, we're saying, which story headlines generated the best A/B test results? And this is really interesting because I think in a product launch, you tend to like work on it quite a bit. You tend to like really hone the messages, what you want to say, but there's still different entry points into the topic, right? There's still like, are we going to highlight more of like the technical side? Are we going to talk about more of the business application? Are we going to talk about, industries and that are affected by this? Are we going to, talk about, trends, where this is headed, how this product launch is indicative of something, that's happening 5 or 10 years from now? All those things are relevant. And so we don't know, we have maybe a message about the product. We don't know which is going to resonate best. So we found very effectively that like A/B testing this, that journalists are a great proxy for the end audience, meaning journalists are in the business of knowing what's going to be interesting to their audience. If you can interest journalists, you can often interest their audience. So we'll try different versions. We'll test different versions. We'll try different ways of explaining things. I think especially for earlier stage companies that might be like, we don't know if this product has perfect product market fit yet. It's kind of new. We don't know where our market might be. We don't know, which persona might want this the most, or which person in the organization might be the key buyer, right? We can sell to the C-suite or the VP level or the director level or like technicians. We don't know. So because of that, I think using story headlines, different versions, of course, if you're doing a press release, you might have one version of that, but then in how you contextualize that for other pitches, it might change. The A/B testing, hugely, hugely powerful. So used much, much more now in product launch PR as well. And an example I want to give quickly was something we did for Postmates and McDonald's. They wanted, we were helping kind of launch new delivery capabilities for McDonald's. They wanted people to know that, they could deliver McDonald's full menu and trigger them to place their first McDonald's order. And so one of the things we did was, as part of this, we created a national Eat What You Want Day campaign that asked local residents in major markets to tell us what they want to eat the most. It was usually a Big Mac. And then we were offering Postmates to deliver the item for free. So this was like mass awareness on the delivery and the sort of the product launch of a sort of complete McDonald's menu. But it actually really focused in on, it has a bunch of other contextual hooks here. We were leveraging this little known holiday, National Eat What You Want Day. We made it a lot bigger. We did this data study to sort of focus on Big Macs, that people love them, we're delivering them. And we added all these sort of contextual hooks. And then we A/B tested the heck out of that, right? So we're like, do we just go with like straight product launch, kind of like news? Do we go with more of like, stuff related to like the Big Mac? Do we focus more on like the delivery capabilities? All that, we just tried all the stuff. And it turned out all of this around like sort of like you can get the item for free on this day, using that to ladder the new capabilities of Postmates was powerful. And so we utilized a location trigger, local metro markets, a time trigger, national holiday, emotional trigger, what you want to eat. And this is all on a product launch, right? It's like all these elements that wouldn't normally be there to contextualize it, to add viral triggers. And so the results of that were, we're getting like, TV news, like this is ABC Las Vegas and ABC Tampa. We're not paying them. They're running essentially our National Eat What You Want Day promotion tied to our product launch. They're just running it on the news for free, or it's running in newspapers, or it's running in influencers and bloggers, or it's running on, like popular online sites like Heavy. So all of that is like using that context, testing a lot of it for what would work. So, and then all this kind of untraditional stuff was working, and then double downing on it made a great launch where we're doing things like 70 media hits, in a day, and 20 TV stations and 75 million impressions. And we delivered over 6,000 Big Macs that day, not to mention all of the brand awareness we got about these new features of Postmates. So that is a powerful way to sort of say this added context having more elements laddering to that product launch can have like powerful effects leveraging PR. So new rule number 3, optimize your pitch via continual improvement, A/B test, try things out. And also, when you try things out, it can also impact your next product launch, right? So we used that for National Eat What You Want Day, but we had several other holidays we leveraged after that because it worked so well. The old way, we'd say, well, how come this journalist has ghosted us? They were interested in our launch. They said they wanted to cover it, and suddenly now, we offer them exclusive. We're not hearing back. What are we doing? What do we do? New way is much more of how can we track this journalist engagement level. So one of the things we're doing, and it's new rule number 4, which is using pitch analytics to track journalist intent. We're really doing this a lot on product launches. For PR is that we're tracking things that are not only like, if we're pitching via email, are journalists opening our email? Are they clicking on our link? So we'll often, in our product launch pitches, make sure there's a link in there just so we can track interest. We're also tracking how long do they read our pitch, right? So we're firing a pixel in the email to see, yeah, they read that for a long time, right? They're very engaged. We're tracking, did they print that email pitch? Did they forward it to someone else? And we're using that to trigger follow-up phone calls and follow-up emails. So the idea here is that we can use new forms of pitch analytics to track if a journalist is interested even before they respond to us. And then for the product launch, if we see these signs they're interested, we can double down. We can take action to follow up and convert those people that are like maybe on the fence, but like you never hear from them if they just, get busy, to suddenly people who are featuring your product, featuring your brand, featuring your company. So that's new rule number 4. The old way, we'd say, well, what story or press release will we do next? We're kind of moving from product launch to product launch. Oh, maybe we're going to take this like bigger launch and sort of like relaunch just like the industry versions of this, right? So you do like your overall launch, and then you do the real estate version and the fintech version and the professional services version. So we kind of tend to be story or press release motivated. I think the new way is how can we work in parallel streams to get faster results? So it's much more of, if we want that big boom on that launch, how can we have maybe different elements of this product for different audiences and actually work in parallel on that? So we've been doing a lot of that lately where, even for those who have like, in-house teams who do a lot of these launches themselves, they're bringing us in to say, hey, we've got our like, industry trade group down pretty well. We deal with them all the time. We know like these 30 journalists are the ones that matter for us. But this particular product has new elements. Like it has these other industries we don't normally play in. It has, there's even like, a consumer angle. If this is a B2B company, there's actually a consumer story here because it does have an impact. Or, this is also B2G. Is this appropriate for governments? We want to make inroads in governments. They'll come to our top government agency and ask for help there. So I think it's much more of less of like, let's do the launch, let's get it done with, and then let's think about these audiences or these niches or these personas. And much more of like, how do we ladder those streams together to get a bigger boom right off the bat? So new rule number 5, work laterally instead of sequentially. So it's not just like launch and then there's these follow-up steps, but it's like, how do we get those things going on in parallel? If they're working in parallel, you don't have to hit a home run on every one. Yeah, you can hit singles or doubles, put them together. It will equal a home run if you get them working together. And so here's a few blueprints that we use to do that. So for launches, we love geo ranking, which is how can we compare different geographic regions to each other to create local news at global scale. So if it's something related to a product, like a pain point we're solving, we'll rank, US states or countries of the world on to the extent they're experiencing that pain point, right? We'll use that as a blueprint to add more hooks for that product launch to give us more lanes to work laterally. Or we'll use the predictor blueprint, which is how can we make a logical prediction about what will happen at an upcoming event. So we'll also use that for product launches. So we'll sort of make predictions for what's going to happen in 2021 related to COVID, use that to contextualize. That's another way in to get kind of a new sort of lateral way to pitch a product. Battlefield is another one that's great for very competitive industries when you're doing new product launches. Like, how can we explain our industry in terms of a warlike battle that is filled with drama and intrigue? What I mean by this isn't just like Pepsi versus, Coke for market share. It's like the cola wars, right? It's like, oh my gosh, can you believe it? Pepsi went to Atlanta during the Super Bowl and bought up every billboard in the city just to stick it to Coke because it was their hometown. Can you believe they did that? This is a battle. So we'll dramatize the battle. That's another way and another lateral channel to pitch that product launch story. Or big number. How can you sum up individual benefits to create an impressive statistic of aggregate impact? So we'll sort of say for this product launch, like, hey, if we can save for this product, we can save the average person, 5 hours a month. How much can we save that person in a year, in a lifetime? How much time can we save the city of Houston coming up next year, right? So we'll create big numbers that contextualize the impact of our product, and then we'll pitch that out and get more coverage that way. So these are all sort of parallel channels and parallel tracks that you can leverage for a PR for a product launch. Jackson, I'm just going to stop there and pause for a second. I sort of introduced our use of blueprints really quickly, but in your mind, I'd love to hear, since you work with blueprints all the time, like the power of using these blueprints, like some of the ones I mentioned for a product launch, to give you a little bit of like a repeatable formula that you can use, particularly when you're doing like lots of different streams of pitches in parallel.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it comes down to this insight that journalists are extremely busy. In fact, there are half as many journalists today as there were in 2008. So the end result of that, they're still expected to turn out just as much content as an industry and as a profession as they were, some years ago. So the key kind of insight with these blueprints is that they allow us to conceptualize of compelling, newsworthy stories very rapidly and deliver them to journalists in a way where a lot of the conceptual work is already done. It's easy for them to understand what the angle is. And so basically by using these blueprints, what we're able to do is act as like story concierges for the journalist, right? We make it
and we were doing work for them, but also we're presenting it in a format that looks like a story.
It's recognized.
Like don't like, we're not going to give you this big thing and like you can go like find in the diamond story in the rough of all this stuff for that one angle that fits you. We're going to package this thing up. It's going to be like on your doorstep with a bow, with like a fork and knife to start eating, right? Like it's going to be ready for you in something that you recognize as a story. That's what these blueprints are.
Yeah, and I think that's huge. I think that's huge when you realize that journalists are busy people who have a lot on their plates. And, the last thing they want to do is be sifting through an unfocused email to find the story. So I think that's huge. I think the other thing is that it gives you a way to anchor your brand into the story in a way that is very, very firm, right? If you're putting it right in the headline that you're delivering with a statistic that makes it just like very sticky, it ensures that when the story gets ran, your core message is still being delivered.
Well, and actually, I actually love the blueprints for, and we really, as you know, Jackson, train our team not to be like, yeah, this pitch is these two blueprints together, or it has an element of this and that, because what it does is it makes your message more distinct. And I think one of the issues is what I call problem in PR pitching is the multi-topic combo meal. What that means is like, you got like, yeah, this is really important about the product, but this isn't really important about a product, but like, don't forget this, and like, don't forget this. And often that happens, like we see it happen a ton with like some of our bigger clients, right? Where it's like, you have a lot of like groups that have like input into that press release, right? And they all need, well, make sure you mention this, but like it must have this, or it didn't have that. And basically you add so many angles, it diminishes the story, the impact of one, where actually, if you could, many of those points are valid. You could piece them out into separate stories with different blueprints that go to different journalists. You can still get the same result of we pitched all of it. We got all aspects covered, but you don't have to do it all in one pitch. Or you get the journalist's attention with one point, they ask more questions, and then you hit them with points 2, 3, and 4, and they're like, oh, that's great. So I think these blueprints, they're separate lanes, and I've yet to see one where, yeah, we did a battlefield with a big number, with a predictor, and it made it more clear and easy for the journalist. Like, I've never seen that yet.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I get riled up on that one, Jackson. That's the multi Let's go on to the next one as we kind of wrap up here as well for today. So the old way, we'd say like, well, how many impressions did we generate for this media placement or this product launch? You know, what was our we need some kind of number. We need to report back to our bosses, the board, on how we did, how the product launch went. Let's like look at impressions. I think the new way is product launches are this great window done well to actually get a huge number of inbound links, which give you traffic, but also domain authority, which supercharge SEO. So I'm not claiming the only thing we care about, because obviously it's a product launch, right? We care about, we want to empower the sales team. We want to do many other things. But one of the new things we're looking at is like, what is the impact on SEO? If we're talking about SEO, how do we think about domain authority? So the new rule is great PR for product launches actually leads to great Google rankings. And I've yet to see at least a digital marketing team that was not thrilled to have all of these inbound links. So the way we do that is with a product launch, we'll work on stories that contextualize, that create a lot of inbound links. That's great if you create a data report or something like that with that, because people can link to it. And we'll use that to broaden the metrics by which we measure a successful product launch. So yes, it can be impressions. Yes, of course, we care of things about later in the funnel, like number of leads or number of people who sign up for demos or other things like that too. But I think we can drive and use a PR product launch to drive a broader range of the marketing mix, including things like SEO that typically you never thought about in the context of a product launch before. So PR, more generally, is a powerful tool for search engine optimization because it can build inbound links much faster than traditional methods. And when you have this ownable area, when you have, like, let's say this data study that people want to link to, you can drive 200 inbound links in a month, where typical link building team of a traditional SEO team, like you're doing 10 or 15 in a month, you're doing great. Here we're doing 200. So I think that's really powerful. And I think we need to start thinking about the metrics we can drive with a product launch better. Essentially, a product launch is just a boom. It's a big moment we can leverage, and we can actually leverage it in multi-dimensional ways across our marketing mix. And this is just a little schematic, and I'll give you my email address in a second. So if you want these slides, happy to send them. This is like how to use PR to create links, specifically using data studies tied to product launches. We can talk about that. But I think really underutilized and where we're headed is that the kind of people who tend to be good at PR are generally not the same people who are good at SEO. Why? One tends to be, SEO, a little bit more left brain, PR, a little bit more right brain. But I think if you can start to think in both of those modalities, there's huge benefits. SEO people are so much better when they know PR. PR people are so much better when they know SEO. You put that together, like we've tried to done in Top, our agency, and you can achieve incredible things. And I've seen products that enter markets that have no visibility suddenly topping the Google rankings 4 months later because of how we structured the launch, how we used it to drive SEO, and it can have huge, huge lasting benefits. And I want to kind of show you, this is scalable backlinks in action. So this is like some of our Top Data is an agency within Top that focuses on creating these data-driven reports. These are 4 that we did. The Job Availability Index is all related to COVID, the Cookie Consumption Index, the Social Distancing Adherence Ranking, and the Fried Chicken Report. I don't know if you knew, but there's a huge spike in fried chicken demand during the pandemic. And so these are all of the do follow backlinks that we were creating from high domain authority sites. And so we're using these 4 reports. We generated 246 links in a sequence of doing these reports like 1 a week. So, the ability, very few people can generate, and companies or brands can generate like hundreds of inbound links of high domain authority in a short amount of time. This method really can, and particularly if you leverage product launches and you leverage product launches with data tied to it. Okay, and these are a few of the kind of places and stories of some of the work we were doing. Final point, before I wrap up with the final thought of the day, is I want to talk about the old way. Was we'd always talk about, how do we leverage key moments on the cultural or business calendar, right? It's like product launches weren't done, in a silo or in a vacuum or in a bubble. We're like, how do we sort of, are we launching this in coordination with this trade show? Are we launching this? We got an education product with back to school. And that makes sense. But I want to talk about the new way being much more of how do we create these key moments that capture cultural interest and attention or business interest and attention, and use these moments we create to deliver our product through it. So the new way is that we can create these moments, not just leverage existing ones. And I want to show you an example of this. So one of the platforms we own at Top, we own our own media channel. It's called National Today. You can find it at nationaltoday.com. And we're the most popular website in the world, and platform in the world for celebrating unique and newsworthy and buzzworthy holidays. So 10,000 media outlets use us as the source of truth of like, when is National Tequila Day? Does National Love Your Pet Day really exist? What about International Dark and Stormy Day, like one that we created for Gosling's Rum? So we're used as a source of truth for that. And I want to talk about how you can create these moments and tie them to product launch PR to give your launch its own natural window. And so we do on National Today, we call it the world's first integrated marketing platform that drives consumers or businesses. We actually do an increasing amount of B2B to take action in a single day across digital, influencer, and PR. And just to give you an example, these are all companies that launched products during windows that they created. So American Express created Small Business Saturday in 2010. Amazon, of course, has Amazon Prime Day, largely sort of copying what had been done by Alibaba in China with Singles Day. 7-Eleven, as you might imagine, July 11 or 7-Eleven is National Slurpee Day. IHOP, there's another pancake day that IHOP didn't create. They created their own pancake day and use it to release and launch new product-like flavors and new kind of offerings as well. So creating these moments and creating a moment for your product launch and for PR for your product launch is really powerful. These are some of the companies that we've done. We've created moments for whether it's Milk-Bone or Laffy Taffy or a beauty brand like Larina Mineral or a B2B brand like Polyscience. Creating these moments, these launch windows for your new product, but using it in a contextual way that makes everyone talk about it can be incredibly powerful. And Jackson, I know you love National Today holidays. I don't know if there's anything you want to add on like the power of these holidays for product launches and this new rule, which is new rule number 7, which is create your own ownable moments for your launch. If you have something and business reasons dictate that you're launching this in August, and you're like, yeah, there's nothing really special about August. It's just August. It's when we got to release this thing, right? We got to get this product out the door. Then you can actually use these like holiday moments to create your own launch window. And we do that B2C side plus B2B side, increasingly used. Let's create the moment that we can own and deliver our product through it.
Yeah, I'd say these holidays are actually hugely impactful for answering a core question that you're frequently asked by journalists in the media, which is why now, right? If they have a queue of 10 different stories that they could be running today, why is it that your story needs to take precedence and your product launch needs to take precedence right now? Chances are the fact that it's a product launch isn't going to cut it by itself. But if you're able to say, well, not only are we launching our product today, but actually our product launch corresponds with National whatever your widget is day, right? It turns out that really matters to journalists. And we've seen that have a really disproportionate impact on the willingness of media to cover up.
And also, Jackson, I think we've observed this too, right? Which is like, you might have your core audience for your product launch, right? There's like locked in, your go-to, but I haven't seen too many companies that wouldn't want to be like, we want to broaden this audience, right? Oh, particularly when you have a product that's like, oh, this product's a little different for us, right? We usually are with target market X, but this one's actually X plus Y plus Z. And so suddenly you got to interest Y and Z. And that's not your core audience that's just going to cover it. That's why these holiday moments, sometimes people think it's a little silly. Like, is this a made up holiday? Well, it's not a made up holiday if people celebrated it, right? Like if people actually do it, like what is the 4th of July other than a holiday that celebrates the US's birth, but we all celebrate it, so it's real, right? So so I think there's great power in that to sort of say, especially if your product launch is like needs to attract audiences other than your core, this kind of strategy of pairing it with a moment is great if that moment can bring in that outside audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to use an example, one that I know we did that was hugely popular was National Transfer Money to Your Daughter Day that got, I think it was what, millions of
shares on this notion of this is the moment to transfer money to your daughter. We had moms and daughters very opinionated on this one too. Millions of shares, people were joking about it. And it was like a great delivery vehicle, and actually could have been a better one for a number of finance companies, online banks, fintech companies. This actually could have been a great moment. I haven't seen a lot of those companies utilize it, but utilize these moments are incredibly powerful for drawing attention. And particularly, if you had been sitting there with your virtual bank being like, you know what, we need to attract different audiences, and we're after families, and we want more families. And we have a great feature that makes it easy for families, like multi-generational, to transfer money and funds. And this would have been a great delivery vehicle to just hit that product launch point hard by creating a moment that would have been shared by, in this case, 2 million people, that would have laddered directly back to your product and this feature that you have. And yet not a lot of those fintech companies or finance companies are thinking like this in terms of how to create these moments.
And that's one that was created really just sort of as an experiment in virality and holiday creation for us, Ben. And I think it underscores how possible it is for us to create, real impact with these moments that, may seem kind of arbitrary, may seem kind of silly, but actually can drive real consumer action and awareness.
Absolutely. And Jackson, I since we talk about this, I know you know the answers, but what is the biggest day of commerce in the history of the world? What day is that?
That's November 11th, Singles Day.
Singles Day in China, which is a day started in, only 10 plus years ago as a day to celebrate your singleness, because it's November 11 as in 1111. You kind of write the numbers out. And, Alibaba got a hold of it, later JB.com. And it's the biggest day. I mean, it's bigger than Black Friday and Cyber Monday combined many times over. And it's a made up holiday, but it's also this anchor point where it got its start is this is the day, it's the anti-Valentine's Day. Don't get something for someone else. Treat yourself, right? You deserve it. You deserve it, Jackson. So it's a great example of made up holiday driving, $80 billion in commerce in a day. Seems kind of real to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, so brings us to the final point of the day, and what I'll leave you with. One, I always want to know, what is the one thing? We are a viral marketing company, so we always want to know what's the stickiest, what's the thing you remember, what's the thing you find most useful. Tweet at me at Benjamin Kaplan. Let me know the one thing that you found most interesting or important or useful, or that you want to comment on, or provocative. Let me know what that is. Second, questions or projects. Would love to hear about it. Either that's, Ben, what do you think about this for our PR for our product launch? Email me, ben.kaplan@topagency.com. Or if you actually want our thoughts working on this, hey, this is a new type of product for us. We've got, we're a B2B company. We want to reach a B2C audience. We're a, we're a company known in this industry, but we want to be in this other industry. Let us know. Email me, ben.kaplan@topagency.com. This is my LinkedIn. I get hundreds of requests a day. So that's the QR code. You can shoot it with your camera or type in that address and basically just put in your note when you request. I always request people who heard my webinar. So put in there, was that your PR for product launches webinar? And I will definitely accept. And then we can sort of connect there, and I'll be doing more content coming up on sort of this kind of new product launch methodology as well. And then finally, we're just a new kind of agency. We love data, we heart data, we collect data, we validate data, we optimize data, we time data, we integrate data, we scale data. So if you are using data in your marketing efforts and you want a communications agency or digital agency or advertising agency or growth agency or insights agency that thinks and breathes data all day long, then we're probably a good fit for you. We're very left brain, but we like to pair that with a lot of right brain creativity. So please let me know as well. Again, ben.kaplan@topagency.com. And the final thought of the day that I will leave you with is just for your next product launch, I would just recommend that, think about it beyond, just the context of this is what we always do on product launches. This is how we do it, and start to try these new approaches. I know I've said some things like, let's work in data and let's do a slingshot around competitors and let's A/B test. Maybe all of us together sounds overwhelming. It doesn't have to be. Pick one or two of those things, add it to your product launch mix. I think you'll see, one, better results for your immediate product launch, but two, I think one of the little tricks and one of the little secrets is you can advance your skills as an organization, as a brand, through each product launch and get better and better. So you can take, you don't have to reinvent the whole thing. 90% of this next product launch for June can be exactly what you did before. Take 10% and start trying some of these other things. And then you're going to learn a ton from that. And then when you go to your next product launch in August, then you apply some of that 10%, you try a new 10%. And over this time, over the sequence, you go 1 or 2 years and you've transformed the ROI, you've transformed the effectiveness. The sales team loves you and sings your praises for all the new business you're bringing. The C-suite loves you because they can reliably count on, we launched this product, we're going to get a great result. And it all starts from taking that extra 10 or 20%, being willing to try some new things, learn from that, redeploy it on the next one. And I think that's a little secret of transforming your ROI and effectiveness. So thank you all for coming. I'm Ben Kaplan, CEO of Top Worldwide. Thank you, Jackson. Jackson has an email address too, if you want to add it there, jackson.carpenter@topagency.com. And we'll see you all next week.
Thanks. Talk soon, everybody.